It's Veterans Day 2024, Monday, November 11th, and a special shout out to all those who have served. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel, and today we have the NTSB preliminary report on the tragic loss of the Beechcraft Baron at Catalina Island while attempting to take off from Catalina Island after dark that resulted in 5 fatalities. Let's check it out. I first reported on this accident on the 9th of October, and in a large part blaming the pilot in command in his aeronautical decision-making for attempting a takeoff at night at an airport that is prohibited from night operations, an unlit runway, attempting to depart into the inky darkness over the Pacific Ocean with fog in the area and a heavily loaded Beechcraft Baron. Now the NTSB preliminary report is out, and it shows more holes in the Swiss cheese model and additional odds that this pilot stacked against himself on making a successful departure. We now know the cause of the delay in the departure time of the Beech Baron, and that is a dead battery in the Beech Baron. Let's check it out. On October 8th, 2024 at 8:05 Pacific Daylight Time, that's well after sunset, a Beech Baron, November 73 Whiskey Alpha, was destroyed when it was involved in an accident near Avalon, California. The pilot, 2 pilot-rated passengers, and 2 student pilot passengers were fatally injured. The aircraft was operating under FAR Part 91, General Aviation Personal Flight. On the afternoon of October 8th, the flight instructor and 2 student pilots were preparing to depart Catalina Airport, Avalon, in a rented single-engine airplane. The rented airplane experienced a magneto malfunction during the pre-flight, which prevented them from departing. So the stranded pilots contacted flight school that they'd rented the airplane from and were informed that another airplane would fly over to Catalina from Santa Monica Airport and pick them up and take them back over to SMO. Catalina, of course, is this famous tabletop airstrip on Catalina Island at the 1,602-foot elevation and just 3,000 feet long, with steep drop-offs on either ends of the runway. The Baron came out of Santa Monica, located just north of LAX. And here's what that NTSB track looked like of that initial flight coming out to rescue the other pilots. Catalina Airport is a non-towered airport located on a flat plateau with descending terrain on either end of the runway. The reported airport elevation is 1,601 feet MSL, and the airport operating hours are from 8 to 5, and the single concrete runway 4 and 22, was not equipped with runway lighting, and night operations are not permitted. And we talked about that in the first report, and it's right there in all the publications for the airport. Information provided by the flight school indicated that the responding airplane, the Baron, was not operated by the flight school and belonged to an acquaintance of the owner of the flight school. The airport manager at Catalina stated that he gave the pilots permission to land at Catalina after closing hours and relayed to them that they had to depart before sunset at 6:31 that evening. The airplane subsequently landed at Catalina at 6:20, so they had, only 11 minutes to load everybody up and blast off out of there, and that was the plan. The pilots shut down both engines on the Beech Baron, loaded the stranded pilots, so apparently there were 2 pilots in the Baron and 3 stranded pilots there at Catalina Island, and attempted to restart the engines. During restart, the right engine would not start due to insufficient battery power. And also, hot starts in the Baron can be a challenge in these fuel-injected engines. If you don't get it right away, you can grind your battery down pretty quick. The occupants exited the airplane, and an extension cord was then attached to an onboard battery charger. That's a little bit of a red flag to me. Did this pilot have an ongoing problem with his battery and possible alternator charging system? Has he been fighting this low battery thing for a while? Why did he happen to have this on board? We don't normally carry around onboard battery chargers with us on board the airplane, unless we know we have this pre-existing condition. The pilots were informed by the airport manager that since the time required to charge the battery would extend beyond sunset, that a post-sunset departure would not be approved. But again, this is kind of a private runway, so they're just dealing with the airport manager there. The pilot/airplane owner informed the airport manager that he had to go and intended to depart anyway. The airport manager advised him that he could not stop him. His departure would be unapproved and at his own risk. The airport manager then went on to his residence about 800. About 8 p.m., he heard what sounded like a normal departure. So he didn't hear anything abnormal about the departure. It was an engine failure or something like that. Airport security video captured. Now, we haven't seen this airport security video yet, but apparently NTSB has viewed it. Airport security video captured the airplane taking off from runway 22, so they're blasting off to the west into the inky darkness of the Pacific Ocean. The video showed dark night conditions were present as, again, there's no runway lights. There's only the lights from the aircraft itself. The video showed dark night conditions were present as the airplane came into view during the takeoff roll about 8:04. It was not possible to discern in the video if the airplane was airborne or not prior to reaching the end of the runway. As the airplane reached the departure end of the runway, it descended out of camera view. It was not climbing. Preliminary ADSB data showed that the airplane may have become airborne around the midpoint of the runway and maintained a low altitude until reaching the departure end of the runway. So he was attempting to accelerate in ground effect to build up his speed. The ADSB data showed the airplane continued a slight descent after takeoff, followed by a right turn until the data ended about 0.6 of a mile west of the departure end of runway 22. The airplane impacted the east face of a ridgeline 0.7 of a mile west of the last recorded ADSB data, so that's about a mile off the departure end of runway 22 in total, at an elevation of about 1,230 feet. So remember, the airport elevation is 1,600 feet, so a loss of nearly 400 feet in altitude. Ground scars were consistent with the airplane striking the ground on a 280 heading in a wings level attitude with the landing gear extended. All right, quick systems review on the Beech Baron. How do you raise the landing gear on the Baron? It's electrically raised. It's an electrical mechanical landing gear system, much like on the 310. It requires a strong electrical system, and it's a 28-volt electrical system on board the Baron. Investigators will need to look at what was the position of the gear switch, but it sounds to me that this pilot did not have enough power in his electrical power in his system on board the Baron to properly raise the landing gear. The wreckage was recovered and transported to a secure location. They're going to examine it further. According to the airport manager, the sky at the time of the accident was clear from the airport surface and above. There was a light breeze from the northwest, approximately perpendicular to the runway. An hour post-accident, he observed cloud tops approximately 200 feet below the airport elevation. Remember, the airport's at 1,600 feet, so that'd be tops of the marine layer about 1,400 feet. An hour post-accident, he observed the cloud tops approximately 200 feet below the airport elevation off the departure end, and the wreckage was located below the cloud tops. So at 1,200 feet, that would put him 200 feet into the soup. A quick overview of the Beech Baron electrical system. 28-volt system usually starts with a single 24-volt battery or two 12-volt batteries wired in series to give you the 24 volts, powering the battery bus. And from there, you also have the left alternator and the right alternator. Each engine has its own alternator to provide power to the battery bus and to keep the battery charged. But remember, if you have a weak battery or you've been nursing a weak battery along for some time, you can overcook your alternators in an effort to try to keep if you try to charge a dead battery with an alternator, there's a good chance you're going to fry that alternator. Now, on twin engine aircraft, we often think we got these multiple redundant systems. It'll be all right. We got the other alternator will pick up the load. We'll just keep going. Now, your artificial horizon in the Beech Baron is typically a vacuum-operated artificial horizon. There are two dry sump vacuum pumps, one on each engine, either which will power the vacuum system and give you the power for the artificial horizon. The directional gyro, depending on what sort of equipment he had on board this aircraft, could be a vacuum operated directional gyro, or it could be a 28 volt HSI, or horizontal situation indicator, relying on 28 volt DC to keep the HSI working. Of course, all of this could have been replaced with a modern electronic flat panel. We don't know what the setup was on the accident aircraft yet at this time. The point being that if this is a vacuum-driven artificial horizon, you should still have an operational artificial horizon, even in the event of a complete electrical failure. But also, in the event of a complete electrical failure, or the beginning of an electrical failure, your interior lighting of your instrument panel is going to start fading, and you need to have that flashlight stuck in your mouth before taking off, especially if you're taking off at night from an unlit airport with a known electrical problem. Too many odds stacked against you. It is time to pull out the greatest safety device known in aviation, and that's the credit card, and just say no. But when all 5 of these pilots begin talking to each other and talking themselves into going instead of staying, you get that, what do you call that? You get that kind of herd mentality, all coming to agreement to a very poor solution. And of course, the landing gear system is electrically actuated. It's retracted electrically. It can be manually extended, but you do not manually retract the landing gear in these light twins. The whole idea of the manual system is to manually lower the gear, not retract it. So looking closer at the preliminary NTSB data, he starts out at runway elevation 1625. Now don't confuse the data from the landing from the takeoff, so you got to look at the data from 3Z. And he's obtaining about 92 knots and maybe 50 feet of altitude by the end of the runway. So the initial acceleration looks normal, but the additional acceleration after what would normally be landing gear retracted does not occur. 97, 102, 109 knots, and the last data point, he picks it up to 122 knots. A fully loaded Baron, 5 people on board that Baron with the landing gear down, is going to be extremely poor performing. And if you have any sort of an engine problem and that gear is down, you certainly will not be able to climb out of that emergency. You have to have the gear retracted in these light twins in order to climb away from any sort of engine failure on takeoff situation. But at this point, we don't know if there was any sort of an engine failure yet with the Baron. It's more than likely at this point a case of stacking too many odds up against you and getting tangled up with the fog right off the end of the runway, spatial disorientation, coupled with the lack of performance of the aircraft with the gear stuck down, and the potential, electrical problem with the dead battery. Lighting in the cockpit, we don't know what that was like. Just a bad situation all the way around. Poor aeronautical decision making. Had they just pulled out the credit card. The problem on Catalina Island is your transportation that late at night. It's a long haul down to the town here of Avalon, down this twisty little road, in order to get accommodations. And it may even be questionable if accommodations were even available at all that evening on Catalina Island. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. Don't stack the odds up against yourself. When those odds start stacking up, start thinking about the BLANCOLIRIO channel and get your wallet out. What's in your wallet? One of the greatest aviation safety devices known to man, the credit card. See you here.